Hello everybody. So just before I start, there are a few keywords today. I'm going to talk about a ladies football team that's called Kerr's Ladies. It's actually the name of a factory, but it's a bit of an unusual name. And then this ladies football team is from a place in England called Preston, which is located in the county of Lancashire. And finally, I'm going to talk about, they were working in a munitions factory, so weaponry and munitions, and therefore they were given the name munitionettes. And I think that's it for the keywords. So I'll start now. Ladies and gentlemen, if you know anything about me, then you might be aware that when it comes to football, I really couldn't care less. Now, that doesn't mean that I boycott it altogether. If there happens to be a football match on in the pub when I'm sitting there, then every now and then I might give it a watch. And I'll admit that from time to time, I can find a match very exciting. But in general, I must say that I'm against paying extortionate prices for season tickets. I'm against the six-figure salaries that footballers earn on a weekly basis. I'm against footballers who flail around on the pitch to try and earn extra time or to earn their team a penalty kick. And I completely despise the hooligan culture that football evokes in my home country. So it may come as a surprise to you then when I say that today I'm going to talk about football. But more specifically, I'd like to talk about one particular women's football team that my grandmother happened to tell me about rather recently. I'd never heard of them before. The football team was called Kerr's Ladies, and they came from Preston in Lancashire, which is not so far away from where my grandma lives still to this day. And so let me begin by telling you a little bit about the history of Kerr's Ladies. The First World War was, as we know, completely devastating in terms of human casualty and mortality on both sides. No other war in history has seen such a huge loss of life, and this was mainly due to the introduction of modern warfare, to new technologies and new weapons that were used. As the famous image reminded men, with the man pointing, "Your country needs you," but the country also needed women. While the men went off to fight, women had to come and work in factories. And indeed, they were no stranger to working in factories before the war, but this was the manual labour that they undertook was greatly increased during this time. The women were therefore working in these munitions factories, and they became known as munitionettes. During this time, the government was concerned about their physical well-being, and they encouraged the women to participate in sporting activities. Among those activities was football, and football became the official sport of the munitionettes during the wartime. Almost every factory across the United Kingdom that was involved in war work had a ladies' football team, but it was in Preston, Lancashire, where the most successful team in the history of women's football was born. So let me tell you about some of this team's triumphs. The football team is so called because it was formed at Kerr and Company Limited. And these very ordinary factory girls from completely different backgrounds and different physical abilities joined together and played football and ended up taking the country by storm. On Christmas Day, 1917, 10,000 spectators came to witness Dick Kerr's ladies' first ever football match, the first ever charity match, because actually every time that Dick Kerr's ladies played and raised any money, all of the money would go to charity. On this Christmas Day in 1917, the Dick Kerr's ladies achieved the first of many victories, and they raised £600 for the wounded soldiers at the time. Now, £600, you might be thinking that's not very much, but in today's money, that would equate to £38,000. The team over the years went from strength to strength, and they achieved more than they could have ever dreamed of. And something that I think is important to note here is that these ladies weren't playing with the footballs that we all know of today. Footballs used to be much larger and heavier. They were made out of the leather, and inside the football they had an animal bladder. So this made them extremely heavy and difficult to kick, let alone to head. And when it rained, they would absorb all of the water and become even heavier. So it's really quite an impressive feat that they could play with such a ball. Sadly, the team turned out to be too good for their own good. And in 1921, the Football Association, also known as the FA, was conscious that its male players were less popular and perhaps less easy on the eye, and so they banned women's football on any football league grounds. The official statement was that the game of football was quite unsuitable for females and ought not to be encouraged. And shockingly, this ban actually lasted for 50 years. So we're talking until 1971, women couldn't play on these grounds. Despite this ban, the team continued to play on any non-football league grounds. And in 1922, the team toured Canada and the USA. Unfortunately, the problems didn't stop there because they were faced with yet more obstacles. And on their arrival in Canada, they were told that they couldn't play at all. And then when they arrived in the USA, they were told that they would have to play against men's teams, which of course is a lot harder. But rather than admitting defeat, they played against these men's teams, and remarkably, in many instances, they won. During its history, a few statistics: the team played 828 games, they won 758 of them, they drew 46, and they lost 24, which I think you'll all agree are quite incredible statistics. So in conclusion, I'll wrap up. I think it's deeply disappointing that people in the UK and elsewhere don't know about the Dick Kerr's ladies, and I can't help but think that if this were a men's football team, then more people would know about it. It would be common knowledge. This is and should be seen as part of our national heritage. Young boys and girls should learn about these women as role models in the sport at a time when, quite frankly, male footballers and male fans seem to be rather letting the side down. Thank you.